I never imagined that the life I'd built with Ashley, my so-called soulmate, could crumble so spectacularly. My name is Michael, and for nearly a decade I believed that Ashley and I were the embodiment of success and refinement. We had the picture-perfect marriage, a handsome house in a quiet suburb, a steady income, and the illusion of a flawless partnership that even our closest friends envied. Yet, beneath that glossy surface, warning signs began to appear like small, almost imperceptible cracks in a grand marble statue. First, it was little things. A subtle change in her laughter, a lingering glance at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she dismissed my suggestions to spend more quality time together. I brushed these off as stresses from work or the inevitable strains of routine. I reassured myself that every marriage goes through its ups and downs, and that our bond was strong enough to weather any storm. But as the months passed, a chill began to settle over our interactions. A growing distance I could neither pinpoint nor ignore. One incident, however, remains seared into my memory. We had planned a much-anticipated vacation trip, a retreat we both had looked forward to as a celebration of our elite status. I recall the day vividly, as if it were a scene from a dark, unfolding play. Ashley, with that infuriating mix of haughty confidence and casual cruelty that I had come to expect from her, dismissed my excitement with a careless air. I remember thinking, was this really the same woman I married? Then came the day of the trip planning that would become a harbinger of all that was to come. In a moment that still reverberates in my mind, I recalled her callous announcement. My wife didn't book a room for me on our vacation trip. Her friends mocked. We reserved rooms only for the elites. We are the only important people. I calmly said, then I will leave, and walked out. Hours later, after ignoring dozens of their calls, something unthinkable happened. Hearing those words, even if only in retrospect, sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just the oversight of not securing a room. It was the symbolic dismissal of me, a gesture laden with insolence. Ashley's friends, a coterie of flashy, self-important individuals with names like Brittany and Taylor, seemed to revel in my exclusion. Their mocking tone, laced with unspoken cruelty, left me feeling like an afterthought in what was supposed to be our joint escape into a realm reserved only for the elites. Looking back, I now see that moment as the first stark revelation of the chasm growing between us. Ashley, with her sly smirk and the air of entitlement she carried like a badge, had always flirted with the idea of being above everyone else. In her eyes, we were the only important people, and if anyone else dared to intrude on her carefully curated world, they were immediately deemed inferior. I had been too enamored with her beauty and charm to notice the red flags, to question the subtle yet unmistakable signs of deceit. That day, as I stood silently watching her breezy dismissal of our shared plans, a dreadful suspicion began to form in my mind. I recalled other instances: a misplaced phone call in the dead of night, a hurried text message left unread, and a way she'd suddenly become secretive about her whereabouts. The sting of betrayal was a concept I had always associated with strangers and villains in movies, not with the person who was supposed to be my partner in every sense. Even now, I can still feel the cold shock that ran through me, a mixture of disbelief and an ever-growing realization. The woman I once adored had transformed into someone I barely recognized. A bitch, a heartless scoundrel who deceived with effortless lies and an almost casual disregard for my feelings. My mind began to churn with the seeds of retribution, a plan of revenge that promised to be as unexpected as it was inevitable. Little did she know, the storm of consequences was quietly gathering momentum. As I sat in the silence of our once shared home that evening, I tried desperately to reconcile the memories of happier times with the bitter present. The journey that lay ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, a path marked by painful discoveries and sudden, shocking events that I could neither predict nor avoid. But one truth remained irrefutable. The trust one once placed in Ashley had been shattered, and every lie she uttered had carved yet another crack in the foundation of our life together. In that moment of quiet despair, with the echoes of her callous words still haunting me, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The seeds of betrayal had been sown, and the act of revenge, long dormant in my heart, was already taking root, waiting for the perfect moment to bloom. And as the first night of my new reality began, I could only wonder what unthinkable events lay in wait for me on the road ahead. It was a crisp autumn evening when the final pieces of her treachery began to fall into place, and my heart sank into an abyss of disbelief. I'd grown accustomed to the little oddities, her evasive answers, the mysterious texts that glowed on her phone in the dead of night, but nothing could have prepared me for the brutal clarity that awaited. That night, I returned home earlier than usual, the stillness of our house eerily oppressive. I was in a reflective mood, replaying in my head every subtle sign I had brushed aside. As I wandered through our dimly lit living room, I noticed Ashley's designer purse left carelessly on the oak dresser. Normally, she would never leave such a prized accessory unattended. A gnawing curiosity overtook me, and I couldn't resist peeking inside. There, nestled between her lipstick and a few credit cards, lay a small, leather-bound notebook. Its pages were filled with scribbled notes and receipts, dates, times, and names that were not mine. Names like Brandon, Connor, and Ryan. Each entry was a silent testimony to a life of clandestine rendezvous. The notebook hinted at repeated encounters, intimate meetings cloaked in secrecy and bold, unspoken promises of discreet dalliance that were far too vivid to ignore. Almost simultaneously, her phone, a sleek gadget that she guarded like a precious secret, began to buzz incessantly on the coffee table. With a sinking dread, I reached for it. The screen lit up with a cascade of notifications. As I scrolled, my eyes caught a series of messages from a man named Brandon. His words were as brazen as they were damning. "Can't wait for our next private adventure, Ashley. Last night was just the beginning." Every line, every flirtatious emoji, pierced deeper into my already shattered trust. The texts weren't mere words. They were explicit affirmations of a betrayal I had long suspected but never dared to confront. With each message, I felt the world around me twist into a nightmare I couldn't escape. There was no room for doubt. Ashley, the woman I had once adored, had been engaging in secret liaisons that she described in a tone so casual it was as if she were discussing the weather. The shock of that moment propelled me into action. Fueled by a desperate need to confirm the horror unfolding before me, I began retracing her steps. I recalled her recent pattern of work meetings that conveniently took her far from home. Using a mixture of intuition and the digital breadcrumbs left on her calendar and social media, I discovered that she had been frequenting an upscale spa that catered to the city's most affluent, and apparently, the most deceitful. But that was merely the tip of the iceberg. One chilly night, I followed her discreetly as she left under the pretense of meeting a colleague. The route led me to an exclusive downtown lounge, a venue radiating luxury and privilege. Hidden in the shadows near a grand marble column, I witnessed a scene that obliterated any remnants of the life I thought we shared. There, illuminated by the muted glow of designer chandeliers, was Ashley, radiating the same haughty allure that had once captivated me. But now her smile was laced with something far more sinister, a smug satisfaction. She was wrapped in the arms of Brandon, his presence undeniably intimate. Their laughter and whispered words, punctuated by soft, suggestive gestures, formed a tableau of betrayal that no heart could easily mend. In that moment, every cliché about infidelity morphed into a living, breathing nightmare. Ashley, that heartless, conniving bitch, the very last bitch I had ever known, had not only betrayed our marriage but had done so with a flair for cruelty. The scene before me was a rapid-fire montage of her laughter, the touch of Brandon's hand, and the glint of mischief in her eyes as if she were mocking me for ever being so trusting. The aura of superiority that she clung to, "We are the only important people," as she once had arrogantly declared during our vacation fiasco, was now tainted by the stench of deception. The raw emotional impact was overwhelming. I felt as though the ground had shifted beneath me, every pillar of my identity crumbling with each revelation. Rage surged through my veins, intermingled with a deep, aching sorrow. The realization that the woman I had promised to cherish had been living a double life, a life where I was nothing more than a convenient placeholder, was a blow I wasn't sure I could recover from. After that night, I returned to our cold, silent home, the evidence of her betrayals heavy in my hands. A damning notebook, a phone full of incriminating messages, and the haunting memory of her betrayal. I sat alone in the darkness, grappling with the dual torment of being deceived by someone I had once loved and the searing shame of having been so utterly and completely blindsided. In the swirling storm of my thoughts, amidst the clamor of disbelief and mounting anger, a single, resolute thought began to take shape. I would not be her victim forever. The ember of revenge, fueled by every gut-wrenching moment of betrayal, had been ignited. It promised to be as swift and unrelenting as the shock that had overwhelmed me. And even as tears blurred my vision, a newfound determination began to overshadow the pain. A determination to reclaim my dignity and confront the wreckage of lies head-on. That night marked the definitive end of the life I once knew. The discovery of her deception was not just a personal heartbreak. It was a cataclysmic turning point, one that would forever alter my course. In the depths of that overwhelming betrayal, I could sense the dark promise of retribution brewing, a promise that would soon drive me into a confrontation from which there could be no return. That stormy evening, as rain pounded the windows and thunder rumbled like the roar of my inner fury, I knew I could no longer remain silent. Every piece of evidence, every incriminating note, every mocking message, demanded a reckoning. I had spent days stewing in my pain and anger, gathering the remnants of our shattered life into tangible proof of Ashley's betrayal. And now, the time for confrontation had arrived. I found her alone in our upscale living room, the space that had once been a haven, now charged with an electric hostility. Ashley lounged on our designer sofa with that infuriating, self-assured smirk plastered on her face, as if the world revolved solely around her whims. The soft lighting, once warm and inviting, now cast long, accusatory shadows across the room. I stepped forward, my voice quivering with suppressed rage and raw hurt. "Ashley," I began, every syllable laced with disbelief and seething anger, "we need to talk. Now." She barely lifted her eyes from the glossy magazine in her hand, replying in a tone so dismissive it cut deeper than any insult. "What is it now, Michael?" "I'm busy," she drawled, her voice dripping with the same contempt that had haunted me for months. Unable to contain the torrent of emotion any longer, I slammed the leather-bound notebook, the very evidence of her covert liaisons, onto the coffee table. Its impact sent a few scattered pages skittering across the polished wood. "Don't act like you don't know what this is," I snarled. "Every name in here, every message from Brandon, Connor, Ryan, it all proves you've been sneaking around behind my back." For a split second, the room seemed to freeze. Then, with a cold, almost amused laugh, she stepped closer. "Michael, you're so melodramatic," she purred, her eyes glinting with a dangerous mix of amusement and disdain. "You always were too simple-minded to understand what real excitement is. I needed something more stimulating than your dull, predictable life." My blood boiled at her casual dismissal of our shared past, the time when I believed we were more than just two individuals living separate lives under the same roof. I recalled the bitter echo of our vacation fiasco. My wife didn't book a room for me on our vacation trip. Her friends mocked. "We reserved rooms only for the elites. We are the only important people," I calmly said. "Then I will leave," and walked out. Hours later, after ignoring dozens of their calls, something unthinkable happened. Those words, once a cold joke, now resonated with the finality of a verdict against me, cast aside as an accessory to her grand performance of superiority. "Exciting," I repeated, my voice rising in pitch and fury. "Is that what you call this charade? Living a double life, telling elaborate lies, and humiliating me in front of everyone? I was nothing more than a prop in your desperate bid for attention." Her laugh turned brittle, a sharp edge replacing the earlier nonchalance. "You're weak, Michael. Always have been. Maybe if you understood what it meant to be admired, what it meant to be important, you wouldn't be so bitter now." That was the final provocation I needed. In a flash of uncontrolled anger and the need to reclaim even a shred of dignity, I lunged forward and snatched the phone from her delicate grasp, a device that had served as the window into her sordid escapades. In one decisive, shocking moment, I smashed it against our marble coffee table. The phone's screen exploded in a network of cracks, shards of glass scattering across the surface like the broken promises of our marriage. The force of the act reverberated through the room. For an instant, silence reigned, punctuated only by the cacophonous patter of the rain and the deep, resonant booms of distant thunder. Ashley's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in a mix of shock and fury. "Michael, what the hell do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her voice a venomous mix of outrage and disbelief. I stood there, chest heaving, the raw intensity of my emotions visible in every trembling word. "I'm done with your lies, Ashley. I'm done with being your accessory in your twisted game of importance." The air between us crackled with the sudden, palpable shift, a battle line drawn in the midst of our shared chaos. Yet, even as I spoke, Ashley's demeanor shifted. Her face twisted into a sneer of utter disdain, and in that moment, I saw the truth of it all. She would never admit fault, never take responsibility for the pain she'd inflicted. "You think breaking my phone fixes anything?" she spat, stepping back as if distancing herself from the fallout of her own deception. "You're just another weak man who can't handle reality." My hand clenched around the remnants of the shattered phone, its cold, jagged edges mirroring the fractured pieces of our history. "No, Ashley," I said steadily, my voice laced with a determination that surprised even me. "This isn't about fixing anything. It's about showing you that I'm not the fool you made me out to be. Every lie, every betrayal, every sneer you've thrown in my face is coming back to haunt you." In that charged moment, the room bore witness to more than a simple marital spat. It was a battlefield, a crucible where every deceitful word and every act of disrespect was being weighed and measured. The shattered pieces of her phone lay like evidence at the scene of a crime, a symbol of the irreversible fracture in our once-cherished bond. The confrontation had left us both raw and exposed. Ashley's eyes, once so full of haughty superiority, now burned with a mix of indignation and an all-too-familiar scorn. "You think this act of revenge will somehow make you whole?" she challenged, her tone icy and mocking. "You're nothing without me." I took a deep breath, the tumultuous sounds of the storm outside echoing the turmoil within me. "Maybe I was nothing to you," I replied softly, "but I'm more than what you see. I'm no longer your punching bag, your accessory in your farce of a life. Tonight, you lost more than just a phone. You lost my silence." As the final echoes of our bitter exchange faded into the oppressive night, I realized that this confrontation was not the end. It was the irrevocable beginning of a reckoning. And even as Ashley seethed with fury, her venomous words lingering in the charged air, I knew that every lie she'd told and every betrayal she'd committed would soon face its own reckoning.